Table mic, one, two, three. Uh, sorry. Table mic, one, two, three. Table mic. Table mic, one, two, three. Table mic. Standing, one, two, three. Standing mic. Standing mic, one, two, three. Standing mic. Mic one, one, two, three. Mic one. Two, one, two, three. Mic two. Mic three, one, two, three. Mic three. Mic four, one, two, three. Mic four. Lost the internet. Mic five, one, two, three. Mic five. That one's still okay. Mic six, one, two, three. Mic six. Mic seven, one, two, three. Mic seven. Mic eight, two, three, eight. Mic nine, one, two, three. Mic nine. I will try six again. One, two, three. Mic six. Double checking. Mic six.
Test one, two, three. Testing one, two, three. Remote test one, two, three.
The June 22nd meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Before we start, we have one commission member online. If they could just identify themselves quickly.
Sean Linehan, Planning Commissioner.
Thanks, Sean. Next agenda item is approval of the agenda. If anybody has any additions they'd like to make to the agenda or changes, let me know. Otherwise, I'd ask for unanimous consent to approve the agenda. Hearing nothing, the agenda is approved. Next is consideration of the June 8th minutes. Please take a minute to read the agenda, the minutes, I'm sorry. And if you have any edits or changes, let me know. Otherwise, I'd ask for unanimous consent to approve the minutes.
Going over this quickly, I'm not seeing that Brian's name is mentioned, who is here with Christian.
I see it. It's on, yeah, it's in the presentation.
Further down.
Section.
Yep, great.
Well, for a correction on that, it's not a new regional plan. They're readopting the old plan and they're gonna do a new one next year.
Steve has made a suggestion. I know, and if anybody wants to make that change, I'd welcome a motion. Otherwise, hold on, I see Mike is still reading. Okay. Seeing nobody saying anything, the minutes are approved. Next is general business. These are comments from the public about anything that is not on the agenda. We have some folks online and we have someone here in person.
But my prepared remarks might fit better before, or when you get to the, say, the subject of the road, I don't care.
It's up to you.
I do now.
All right.
They have some more to do with whether this, what this planning commission does.
You can just identify yourself.
Steve Whitaker. I follow the Country Club Road process closely, and I want to give you in plain terms one reason that neither proposal in front of you can meet the city's needs, and why this body in particular is the one that can begin to set it right. Tonight, you're moving towards a recommendation on choosing a developer, but three decisions have to come before that choice, and not one of them have been made. First, how clean, and clean for what? Regarding the brownfield, the whole 133 acres is an enrolled brownfield, and the cleanup and soil are one problem, not two. Here's the part that hasn't been explained. There are two completely different questions hiding inside is the soil safe? One asks whether it's safe to walk on it and build on it. The other asks whether food grown on it is safe to eat. Those take two different testing methods, and the first one can never answer the second one. The standard cheaper test, which is what's been done so far, averages a whole area or a decision unit by taking a bunch of samples and then mixing that soil together and then testing it. And an average can quietly hide a bad spot, the way a river that's 3 feet deep on average can still be over your head in the middle. To know a garden bed is safe to eat from, you need tight testing aimed exactly at where the food will grow. And once you've run the average test, you can't go back and pull a food safety answer out of it. You'd have to test all over again and pay for it twice. So the order is forced. You have to decide where food will be grown and which of these prime ag soils you're keeping for it before you test, so that the testing can be aimed at both establishing which prime ag soils are going to be reserved and which are the cleanest places for growing food. Only then can you lay out the streets and the buildings and the pipes around those areas you've reserved and cleared. That's why there's no site plan for the land and why there honestly can't be one yet. Both proposals still put a number on number of homes, 325 or 288 for ground no one has yet measured or set aside. You don't choose the size of the building before you measure the lot, and you don't pave over the garden before you've decided where the garden is. Secondly, who the housing is for. There are two different things we call affordable. One's a home priced to what people here actually earn, a teacher, a nurse, a town employee, with the costs built down by keeping land and infrastructure out of the price. The other is a small subsidized slice, income eligibility, forms and all, with everything else at market rate. Here's what should stop us. The city's already planning on giving this land away for $1 and paying for the roads and the pipes with public bonded money. That's the affordability lever in our hands right now. Under both proposals, it will flow into market rate housing, homes for people who can already afford to buy here. We, the people of Montpelier, who bought this land for our own benefit, won't be necessarily the beneficiaries. Not for exacerbated unaffordability. Third, what's the rest of the land for? The developer selected is offered about 20 acres. The buildable land is far larger. Until we decide what the rest of the land will hold, workshops, community spaces, recreation, more homes, no one can possibly do the traffic study because the traffic depends on everything that uses the single road in and out on Route 2. And until the traffic is resolved, nothing can be built. No permit will issue until a full capacity, full use build out analysis is modeled in traffic, including those first 20 acres. Notice that all three of these issues have the same shape. In each one, a decision comes first, then the testing or the study, and then the plan. Deciding where the food goes, test it, then site the buildings. Decide everything the land will hold, model the traffic on that one road, then site the buildings. In that order, it works. Reverse it, pick the developer, then study the market, then find out what's safe and what fits, and you're building on answers you don't have. Here's what ties all three together, and here's the part that belongs to you. Every one of these first decisions lives in a single document, a master plan for the whole parcel. Under state law, Title 24, Chapter 117, preparing that plan in public with the public is the Planning Commission's job. The city plan you adopted last year contains no master plan for Country Club Road, none. In its place, a developer selection process is being run as if it were the master plan. But the request for proposals is not a master plan, and it can't stand in for one. I'm not opposed to housing on this land. I want it built and built well. I'm asking the law actually assigns this task to do the part that's yours. Acknowledge that the plan which should have come first was never crafted, and tell the city council that selection should pause until it is. The land isn't going anywhere. The grants, though tight, haven't yet expired, although they may, before anything is built because of the brownfield delays. What closes the door is signing the land away before the plan exists. So I'll leave you with one question. I'd ask each of you to answer it, hopefully tonight on the record. If there's still no master plan for Country Club Road, no decision on the cleanup, on who the housing serves, or on what the rest of the land is for, what exactly is the developer being selected to build? Thanks.
Is there anybody online? No hands are going up. Next is comments from the commission. I don't have anything.
Marie and I met with a few housing committee folks last week to continue our conversations, and the big takeaway for me is that they are also going to jump into the CVRPC map that we all discussed at the last meeting and come up with some additional recommendations. And I think they said they'll be sharing those with us as well, but they'll be comments. Ultimately, they go off to CVRPC.
those comments, are you planning on commenting directly in the map that they had, like through that avenue, or are you compiling them? Are we compiling them? How are we sharing our
Yeah,
comments?
I think that's a really good question about what this process looks like. Admittedly, I've put a couple of comments personally into the map as like a few weeks ago when it was just sort of sent around to us separately. I'm not sure if that was the best approach, but one of the things I will note is that it's a living document. So some of my comments are no longer relevant because they filled them in. There were some areas of the map that were just blank, and I made comments about that. They're now filled in. I personally think that because it's a living document and it's like individual comments that are anonymized going into it, that we should come up with a more formal approach than just making comments in that map. I don't know what the housing committee's plan is exactly, but beyond them sharing their information, their feedback with us.
And were we thinking of having a unified approach with the housing committee, or just our two separate committees sort of providing feedback that may or may not be similar?
That's a good question. As I recall, I think that they were going to send it to us to then integrate. Yeah, I believe. But I think the first steps are for them to formulate they were doing their own mapping. Actually, Mike and Nick at the planning department were in touch with Sandy Vitzium, who's on the housing committee, helping with her with some map data, and then their recommendations are going to come from that effort and then towards us. Great.
Anybody else?
And
Nope.
sorry, do we have a time frame, or no, just as soon as it's available, whenever that is? When to expect the housing committee's recommendations?
I think that there was a plan to get that to us before our first July meeting. Yeah.
The public comment period. Trying to remember now. Jog my memory. The map has just been released. Is the RPC's public comment period open now already, or they have?
I assume so that
Yeah. I'm just trying
that map that they have is publicly available
Yeah.
and anyone can go in there and make comments. I don't know if that's the extent of it.
Yeah, it hasn't been updated. I know they've got some stuff, and that's a little bit of what I've been waiting for is to see their updated map. And I was just looking at it right now. That's what I was trying to look up, and I noticed it still has the errors that they were talking about last time. So
Yeah, the pieces that I had known the pieces that I had seen that were dynamic and had been updated was maybe 3 weeks ago prior to our last meeting.
Mike, do you know when the comment period closes?
I don't know that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping. I know they said they were gonna try to get this submitted by the end of the month, so I was kind of hoping there'd be another round where they refresh the map and put it back out to kind of go through and see what did they do with the comments that we gave them.
Great. So I guess in the meantime, we'll wait until we get the comments from the housing committee, and we can have a discussion as to what we want to do with them, if anything. And we'll go from there. Thanks. Anybody else? No. Next is review and discussion of revised Country Club Road developer proposals, and we have the two updated proposals. We had an initial discussion at our last meeting. It's fairly short, but I wanted to put this on the front of the agenda just because we do have a bit of a short turnaround time in terms of if we're going to develop comments and get those drafted and approved at the next meeting before the city council really takes action on this. So I don't know if again, we had a very general discussion, high level discussion at the last meeting. I don't know if folks have had a chance to really drill down on the revised proposals and if you've got thoughts, but I'll just turn it over to anyone who has anything to say.
I've spent a little bit of time with it, and I think my overarching comment is I love both of them. If either one of them were to be built tomorrow, I would celebrate. I think that's so. If we're like splitting hairs, for me it feels like I think the number of initial units outside of the future phases are more in the Chinburg proposal, and also the Chinburg proposal does include some fields that have been part of this discussion all along. And that said, if DEW's proposal at the end of the day hits particular marks in terms of economics, can it be built? Is it possible? What's the timeline? I would very easily shift in that direction. For me, it comes down to, can it be built? It's very simple in my mind.
One of the things that I was looking at, and something that I appreciate about Chinburg's proposal, I was comparing the commercial space, whether it was integrated or not, with Chinburg. Sounds like it is incorporated in their latest iteration, whereas DEW's response was that they're open to evaluating commercial space inclusion, but it would only be feasible with committed tenant partners. So I personally like the idea of that, mixed use with commercial and residential space. So for that reason, I'm also kind of leaning a little more towards Chinburg, although they give us 3 concept iterations, and I haven't quite decided on, if Chinburg is the one we are leaning towards, which concept iteration of the 3 that they provided.
I'm curious if there are, Sean, you don't have any updates from CCR meetings, do you? If not, that's totally fine. But I'm curious about your knowledge of current thinking.
They canceled a meeting last week, and it's now scheduled for a week from today. So I don't think that the CCR subcommittee has had a meeting since our last planning commission meeting. And they were hoping to, the last time I went to attended their meeting, they had said they were wondering if there was any public feedback, and they hadn't gotten much at all, and that there will be that, but it was brought up that they should anticipate getting feedback from the planning commission. And if nobody else there has any feedback on this, I probably said this last time, but one of the things that stands out about Chinburg is the density of the footprint on their development, that leaving room for potential future phases, and really just maximizing the use of the space. And I also noticed that they do have that they have commercial integrated as opposed to DEW. But I'm interested to, if anybody else, like how they want to structure a recommendation. Because I agree with Tim that, we shouldn't, I don't see any reason to outright reject, either proposal.
I'd agree with that too.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to say that we like both of them. Both would be a benefit to the community. I kind of agree with everyone else here that the Chinburg proposal seems to be more in line with Montpelier and the type of development that we like to see. But again, even if it was DEW in the end, I think it would also be a net boon.
Yeah, I'll just say I tend to agree, and I think, Tim, to your point, that it's really just going to come down to the feasibility in terms of the finances that we are obviously not privy to. So to that end, it feels like there's a bit of a consensus here, unless I'm reading the room wrong, which is, I think we'd be fine with either the proposals, and to the extent I think our comments might be most helpful to sort of highlight the sort of salient features of each of the revised proposals, particularly with Chinburg, and sort of highlight the things that we think we should really try to make sure get nailed down. And I think like we did last time, it might be helpful to see if we can tie some of those features to portions of the housing chapter in the city plan, to sort of ground our recommendations in our sort of master document that we've put together. So I will say this, I'm pretty maxed out for the next month, and I'm not going to have any capacity to draft anything. So if anyone here wants a writing project, I don't suspect that these comments will be nearly as detailed or long as the last set that we had. So I would guess, 1 or 2 pages max would probably do the trick here.
Before we start talking about who's going to draft it, can we talk about if we are leaning towards Chinburg or have additional comments about the 3 iterations? I'm curious if people have opinions. I will say, let's see, I'm on page 12 of the PDF. There's 3 concept iterations. The middle one, I'm less enthusiastic about. It seems really spread out, whereas I think the other 2 iterations, the first and the third, do a good job kind of making more denser pockets. One is described as a buzzing village center, and the other one is dense and walkable. So I don't necessarily have a strong preference between which one is my favorite. I just know that personally, the Hamlet's tuck into slopes is my least favorite.
I think those were their iterations.
Oh, tell me.
Actual design was on 2 pages or was what their final proposal ended up being. Right. So that's their actual proposal.
Okay. Why are there iterations?
I think they just put those in there as this was how they thought through the process. This was their thinking process. And
show their work.
And then yeah.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Leah. And I think that is something you can call out as a positive in their final proposal, which does speak to what Sean was talking about earlier as well, which is focusing on a smaller overall footprint and getting a lot of units into that space. Potential future phases. I mean, it would be nice to have a little bit more information there. Actually, they do provide some in the bottom left of that final map. Potential future phase single family with 22 units in that space. But who knows? I do think that concentrating closest to the entrance in those flattest areas and leaving a lot of future possibility seems very good.
Can we share like the pros for each?
Sure.
To help
Yeah.
guide
Yeah.
that letter? So Chinburg does break down rentals versus sales. Did you guys all see that? And it's like 325 units. But 250 of them will be rentals. which is actually would be a huge influx, I feel like, for Montpelier. 75 would be home ownership model. And then within that is it looks like 80% of the rentals are either a studio or one bedroom, which again, I feel like it's like a type of housing that we don't have a lot of here, you know? So I'm curious, like, because Gabe said that studios don't rent, but I don't know. What do you guys think about?
But anecdotally, what I've heard is that the spaces that are, I may have said it before in one of our meetings, the spaces that are for rent up at the College Green are rented out,
Oh,
and there's quite a bit up there, and I think there are units that are basically singles with shared facilities, and they're rented. So I think there's probably a pretty huge demand for that.
The one thing I do like about Chinburg is, again, these townhomes that are 1,500 square feet, and it seems like small homes are really something that Montpelier does not have a lot of. There's a lot of large Victorians. There are condos up, up Northfield Street, but these kind of like small homes, which are affordable to maintain, are, I think, few and far between here. So I do like that design.
Patty Green, I can't remember. It might have been Sandy Vitsium who a while ago when she did her
Yeah.
informal survey, and that sort of rose to the top in terms of what was desired were those small single family homes.
And the same idea is like small homes that are walkable to amenities, which these would be. Because right now we don't really have that. I mean, we have the downtown and we have apartments downtown, but there aren't like small homes that someone could buy walkable to downtown.
I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, and yeah, my memory is probably foggy about this, but I do remember there being, and Mike, maybe you can help me out with this. Is there's a sense that, and I can't remember where this information came from, but this idea that there is a pretty vocal cohort of folks that would be willing to downsize their homes, but there's just not a housing stock to allow them to do that. Do we have data on that, or am I just sort of?
There were ad hoc groups that were out a couple of years ago talking about that. It was always tough because they wanted to downsize, and I think some of the assumption was, well, we'll sell our house for a lot and buy something that's less. And when you actually got down to building new units, it's like, well, you're selling your house that you own for $500,000 and probably buying another place that's $450,000. But you're moving from 2,500 square foot house down to a much smaller footprint. And their assumption was, well, I'm cutting my square footage in half. Shouldn't it cut my mortgage in half? And it's like, well, no, it doesn't actually work that way.
Right.
But I think there is still a demand. I always try to remind people, if you look at the statistics for Montpelier, I think it's like 43% of all households are people living alone. I mean, and usually when we're talking to city councils and planning commissions and we start asking, it's like, well, that's not anybody who's actually in the room. Everybody in the room, family, has kids, and you forget you're the minority in households. The majority, well, not the majority, the plurality of households is people living alone. And so the idea of singles and studios actually helps out a lot because it offers a lot of space for people, especially young people, people who might be new nurses and people from the hospital who are looking for places. These types of smaller rental units are a great opportunity to kind of get in. And yes, if you're talking about, well, we need more home ownership opportunities, that's true. But we need every opportunity. And so I think that's what they're wrestling with. I'll just go back real quickly, kind of change the topic a little bit, just to go back and answer one of the questions Aaron had, that asking Sean where the subcommittee is. Kind of where the subcommittee ended was to basically have a conversation of one of our biggest questions is just going to be coming down to math. Which of these two is viable, and which of these two is viable for a chip? If there's too much subsidized housing, then you might not have enough increment. We just need to have somebody do the math. And that's what Stephanie was doing. And she didn't have enough information from the developers to get the answers for last week, which is why we postponed our meeting till next week. Because Stephanie wants the opportunity to get those answers so we can come in and say they're both viable, or one's viable and one's not, and here's why. And in that way, they can start to narrow down, because if one's not viable, we can quickly narrow down to go through and say, okay, who's our viable candidate? And what are the asks and what are the deficiencies that we might see in that, or maybe there isn't a deficiency, but I think that's where the committee is at this point. They really didn't get into the conversation you're having right now of which one did we like and why do we like it, because they kind of took a step back and said the same thing you did. Both of these are going to work. Let's find out which one is viable. Or if they're both viable, then we can start sitting down and saying, now, public, commissions, committees, which one do we like and why? And are there other adjustments that we want or expect out of either one of these?
That's helpful. And I'm curious if we would want to hold off on putting together a document until that's figured out.
Yeah, that was my question. What's the process for that? So at the next meeting next week, they intend to sort of have this, I call it a viability determination. Is that something they announce, or is it going to be executive session kind of thing?
I'm sure it'll happen. The debrief is going to happen in executive session because a lot of it's proprietary.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure if they're narrowing the field, they'd have to be coming out and making that kind of announcement or making that kind of decision. But I think where you're going with your discussion right now of a short 2-page that really lays out, hey, we like both of them. Here's the strengths of Chinburg. If we're rating them, Chinburg's a little higher. This is why we like Chinburg a little bit higher. And then if you're also then going through and saying, here are the qualities of DEW that we liked, then if Chinburg gets eliminated for one reason or another, then you can go through and say, all right, at your July, I get that right, 13th, 8th, whatever the first July meeting.
Yeah.
You'd be able to just go through and adjust that memo, because whoever's putting together the memo is going to put together a draft and bring it back to the planning commission anyway. So.
Right.
Or somebody can put it together really quick. There's a, kind of writing on the fly at the 13th meeting, if somebody's willing to have a few statements already kind of framed out. That process is up to you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out sort of process wise what we want to do with that. We had that information.
Well, Sean just unmuted.
Yeah, I think it's worth moving forward with a statement from us. If we I think if we wait too long and this goes to city council, mid-July next month, and we're not ready with something, that'll be unfortunate. But whether somebody wants to wait and see what the outcome of next Monday's meeting is before really diving in. I think that's reasonable. But to plan to have something to review at our next meeting, with the goal of approving it and then sending it to the entire city council.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to have something done and executed by our next meeting on the 13th. So it feels like we can just speak to both of the proposals in our comments. And again, I don't get the sense anybody feels bad about either of these proposals. And so I think it really is just sort of reiterating some of the high level things. Like, for instance, I like the preservation of the ball field, of the fields, with Chinburg. I do like the commercial space. It's, these are themes that I think we're all sort of saying. So just sort of highlighting those things again. I think what might be useful is to, and I haven't done this, so I'm kind of spitballing here, is just going back and taking a look at the original proposals for both Chinburg and DEW and just take a look and see what really did change and sort of give kudos to the developers when they did things that were responsive to some of the issues that we raised, and sort of encourage them to keep going in that direction. Or if they didn't, just sort of remind them, again, here's what we said in our comments. We really like to see this, and we don't see it yet. I think again, this will be a pretty high level document where we can just refer to our original comments and just contextualize things. Steve, you have something?
Yeah. I'm not going to get into depth because, as you heard in my prior comments, that neither of these is sitting on a foundation that's decidable. But Chinburg is a private equity funded, vertically integrated company that will, in effect, if they were to be granted this project, they would be extracting $8 to $10 million out of central Vermont. They bring their crews in from New Hampshire. They build, they go home on the weekends, paying their paychecks. They don't help us build developer capacity here in central Vermont, which is what we need if we want to develop Sabins or, any of the other projects. So look at it from a regenerative versus an extractive economic. We don't have an economic committee, so economic development falls into your plan again, not a fleshed out chapter. So the vagary of how Chinburg proposes to go beyond the 20 acres, is it just assuming that the city will bend to their will because they've already got the first 20, they'll, give up the next phase and the next phase? And commercial space is not civic village. That's not putting high rent retail, at market rates is not going to house people who work in Montpelier. They won't afford these rents. And putting in commercial space up there, the downtown merchants will probably rebel against it, because really a village like this really needs a bodega, maybe a bakery, a childcare, but not competing retail. And again, the traffic probably can't support competing retail. So this planning process, I'm doing my best not to get choose rude words for how ineffective this planning process, but it really falls on y'all for having skipped it. And it's kind of folly to be, yeah, it looks good from my house, when you're the ones who didn't do the job,
I'll just say that the future phases on the Chinburg does not have to be Chinburg. That is space that the city will continue to own and could put out for future bids. Doesn't have to be Chinburg. There's no reason for that to be Chinburg. The amount of commercial space proposed is a very reasonable amount of space. And considering that this is going to be a fairly isolated neighborhood to begin with, having space for, like Steve said, a bodega or some sort of market, bakery, It's very reasonable. These are things that we've considered, and this planning process, I just take umbrage with the way that Steve, you've portrayed these, that we haven't thought about these. We have thought about them.
Right. So do we have anybody that's willing to put pen to paper on this and
Can I
draft something?
say one more thing before we decide
Please do.
who's drafting it? I feel like I may be the only one that is not enthusiastic about 40% of the apartments being studios. Is that just like a gut feeling? I don't know. To me, that's not necessarily a pro, and that's a minor thing, but as someone that is drafting something, I just wanted to put that out there, that seems high in my opinion of how many studio apartments. So I don't know if that we need to resolve that right now, but I just need to
Sure.
put
No,
that.
and that was part of the reason why I asked the question of Mike, because I'm unclear about what the right housing mix is. And if there is some data out there that suggests that there is a market for
Yeah.
studios and one bedrooms, then I'm all for supporting that. But, I understand what you're saying. I just don't have enough understanding
Yeah.
of what the market forces are at this point. So.
I think Chinburg's model is, they do a lot of development and they built a lot of apartments. They're down obviously in Portsmouth, Portland, right on the seacoast. And so they have a lot of experience, and that's their history over time. And all the market analysis show this is the mix and this is why they picked this mix. Now, is it the right mix for us? That may be the right mix down there. Their plan is to follow up with additional specific market studies, but their belief is that that's the number. And I'll back up a little bit just to go through and say this is a little bit of why we kind of deferred this to the developers to figure out, is because they're the ones who are putting in the $60 million to build the project. They're going to do the homework. Rather than having us kind of guessing or doing the theoretical work, and our money isn't, if we were spending the $60 million and we were going to pay them to build our project, then yeah, we need to have a market study so we make sure that that's viable. In this case, they're the ones who are going to be putting the money in, and they think these are the viable percentages based on the demographics that they see here. So I'm not going to second guess folks who put big money into these projects, because if they were wrong a lot, they wouldn't be doing what they do for very long.
But to your point, Leah, I am always sort of in the back of my mind, I'm always cognizant of, like, Montpelier has unique demographics. And so I never know how that plays into these sort of housing mix proposals, if our sort of demographics are adequately taken into account when they come up with that mix or not. But
yeah,
that's a good question.
Yeah, and I'll point out that the other piece that they are looking at, the subcommittee and Stephanie are looking at, and I don't think much of this is in the public version, but the estimated rents are some of the figures that she's looking at. So, the studios may be ones that make for much more affordable units for people who are looking to rent, as opposed to going with a slightly larger rental unit where, it's like, that's great. We've got X number of units now coming online, but they're all at, I don't know. I'm outside of the confidential data. So $2,400 a month. It's like, oh, great. So now we've got some 2 bedrooms, but who's affording that? As opposed to, well, we've got a lot of studios and they're in the $1,600 rent. Okay, well, that's more affordable for people of, now do we have enough people in that price range? I think that's what Stephanie is doing in her evaluation, and the subcommittee will be looking at in their deliberations is, okay, not only are we looking at what's there, what are the price points that those represent?
Yeah, and I think that's my kind of where my head was at too, is like, who is affording a house off of one income, just like kudos to the person that has, that lives in a one bedroom that is affording their rent off of one income, whereas like two bedrooms, you could have two people splitting rent. So yeah, my brainwave is the same as yours, that it's not just about like how many bedrooms there are, but the price points of the affordability that make it so that a one bedroom apartment or a studio is affordable to a single income kind of earner. So
Yeah, just looking at the down street development that's up in Berlin, that's currently being developed, near Walmart.
yeah, the Fox Run.
Yes, the Fox Run. Just seeing that for a studio rental is going to be around $1,100, $1,800 for a 3-bedroom. And there's 30 units going in there. And apparently the larger plan is 350 to 500 units total in Berlin. So I think that's a pretty good comp for CCR.
Have you guys found, does DEW break down the apartment types? I haven't been able to find it.
That's sort of a very focused
Define
Q&A.
Define which one? Which fact?
Like the studio to 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom breakdown.
I'm trying to see. Here's the development summary. What have we got? No, it just says multifamily, 35 units, 8 plexes, 40. Yeah, it doesn't say whether those are.
And then phase 1. Is phase 1 what we're currently looking at? Or is that?
Yeah, that I believe is their phase 1. It's the lower loop. So
that's a pretty big comparable. I mean, phase 1 is 108 units, and Chinburg seems that their phase 1 is 325. And maybe it's not a
they
3 or
broke
1.
theirs into phases as well, but their phases, obviously they're all compact down in the bottom, so they have one chunk they're doing first and one chunk they're doing later. They actually may have broken it into multiple phases.
Yeah, I'm seeing that 325 and up to 340 with potential future. And I think that future phase is the single family homes at the top. Oh, sorry. Phase 1 is at 167, about 167 units for Chinburg.
So it's what page are you on?
One more comment.
I can share. Oh,
No, no.
I'm in Chinburg. So you wanted the phasing in Chinburg?
Did you find it, Tim?
No.
Okay. Steve, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, about the housing market study, you're not prepared. I'll say that definitively. Y'all are not prepared, nor is the subcommittee, nor is the city council, to make a decision on this without having a market study in hand. That's how you decide which builder could better meet your needs. How many of what size unit, located where, with what types of transportation, at what price point. And that came up at the housing committee when the Regional Planning Commission presented their housing compilation of data, the current status of income and housing units. But the market absorption study has not, and it's somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000 if you bolt in the transportation modes. But that's the information you need to weigh these proposals against. And that is fundable through the brownfield assessment program that we're already a part of. That's an allowable expense to do that market study through the brownfield assessment fund, the 1.2 million that the Regional Planning Commission got. So that's probably the most important thing you could do is say, we're not ready to make a decision until we've seen and crafted a market study. And I'm recommending that we bolt in the transportation modes. Are you willing to live with less than 2 cars? You know, if you've got this kind of location and set up and multimodal access. And what about the stigma of the brownfield? If we're going to likely have areas that are capped and regulated, and you're going to have to worry about whether your dog is burying a bone in an area that hasn't been fully cleaned. So the housing market assessment absorption study is a prerequisite to making any decision like this, not just leaving it to a developer who will pay for it and then only tell us pieces of it. It's our land. We need to have the data on how we're going to develop it. Some of that is laid out in this paper.
It's technically page 6, but it says page 4 on the bottom, has revised phasing. Phase 1 is 142 multifamily apartments, 13 townhomes, 12 single family homes. And also the 10,000 square feet of retail.
Oh, this is Jim.
Maria, I think that phase 1 of Chinburg is basically the bottom multifamilies, and then to the northwest, to the left, those units. And then things up to the northeast are phased, and some of that, like MF7, townhome 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are phase 2.
Why am I finding it so confusing?
Oh, no, I know. I am literally zoomed in. So,
Are you,
so
anyone else just like,
I can leave the image up if you want.
okay.
but then the townhomes 3, 4, 5, and 6, we think are part of phase 1 in the northern end.
Can I ask a kind of a baseline question? Why do we care?
Well,
No, I'm not trying to be flippant.
I-
I'm like, what? I don't. What?
I think comparing apples to apples, how many units are we going to get in the first phase? Is it comparable, or is Chinburg actually have like 50 more units or
But is it-
something
but is
than
it, but is it
DW?
worth? I mean, is it worth weighing the two proposals against each other based on what goes into the first phase versus the?
I think
50
it is,
units.
because I personally like looking at this from a very cynical perspective. Who knows if phase 2 happens? I think phase 1 is much more of a stamped.
Yeah, that's where I'm thinking too. Like, what if it ends at phase 1? And phase 1 for one is like 100, and phase 1 for the other is like 300. You know. That being said,
No, that answers my question.
I don't
I'm
know.
there. That's. I was not sure why we were asking the question. That's.
Okay, so Chinburg. Sean, where are you seeing this like MF?
On that actual map, there's MF. They label these chunks of buildings, right?
Right.
TH1, MF1, 2, and I believe that they've labeled these things based on somewhat on phasing.
Oh,
And that the numbers that they're talking about up above in the part that Tim is pointing out line up with some of the numbers of the clusters that they've labeled. How many of those multifamily buildings, I'm not entirely sure, but the 12 single family homes and the 13 townhomes is what lines up with that area up to the left in
Okay.
TH1. But I guess more importantly, you're looking at the number of units is what you guys were asking about. And so one,
right.
it's 25 units for sale and 142 apartments.
Right. Okay, I see that now. Yeah. So it's it's pretty much like 60 unit difference in phase one.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading as well.
Yeah, but probably DEW's probably closes off as a. If there was like only phase one got built and nothing got, it kind of closes itself off as a discrete unit, where this one might leave itself open as
Hmm.
looking like an unfinished neighborhood. If phase
Is that
one
a
got
curve
done.
back?
For others to decide.
Plan drawings or for some other?
Oh, I was just looking at if they built MF on this image, MF1, MF2, and these developments on the left, it would just seem a little bit to me that,
Leaves more space.
yeah, it leaves a lot of space and it would kind of seem like it was unfinished.
Fair.
The other one would kind of build out to a little neighborhood bump and
Right.
But yeah, I think the primary difference is that just the amount of density here compared to for DEW to reach a similar 300 number over its phases would require developing a lot on the top of the hill.
All right, I'm gonna ask it again.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to write this thing? Oh, boy.
I can write it. If there's nobody else that can do it, I can write it. I can have something for the first meeting in July, and I'll circulate it ahead of time.
Great. And so just as a reminder, if Sean sends it to us, just take it, make revisions on it by yourself. We'll discuss them at the meeting, as opposed to swapping red lines back and forth over email. So
Yeah,
thank you, Sean.
I think it would be great if we could have something to vote on at that meeting.
Yeah, I think we can get there. Again, I just envision this to be a fairly discrete document.
Yeah.
We can talk about some of the particulars of it, but I think
Is it worth or possible to send individual feedback to Sean, or does that challenge things as well? Make things more challenging?
I would just assume do it all together, just
Okay.
because we might just get competing if we're sending things individually. It's
Yeah,
hard
that's
to
fair.
Hash it out. If it was a bigger, more dense document, I'd say that's the way to do it. But this, I think, will be fine. And I will probably eat crow.
No, I think it's a good assessment.
Then sending it one-on-one is legal.
Yeah.
It's when it becomes a group project that
Right.
it's not legal.
Okay. Anything else on this one? Nope.
No.
Moving on. Next is a discussion of the regional plan update. Hand it over to Mike.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a lot. I mean, we talked somewhat about this at the last meeting. Let me see if I can make that go away. Looks like I can't. All right. So this is where the CVRPC is at with their current online map, which I know is not the most up-to-date map. So I think what we had started talking about, and I'll point out some of the errors are the green area, any area in the growth center and in the designated downtown should not have any of this green. This green is the flood hazard area, which is required to be conservation. But the heritage, these old, it's not heritage, what's the word they use? But the existing designations, legacy, there we go, are they don't have to keep track. So I'll point out, like over here, we can see the Sabins pasture, and you see there's a zone A that's coming down in. In that case, it should not be on this map because that is part of the growth center, and therefore there should not be a conservation exclusion area on that parcel. And Brian was fixing that. Also in the downtown. Right now, our entire downtown on the future land use map is conservation. Clearly, that's not the case because it's designated downtown. So I just wanted to point that out. If you're looking at the map, those are errors on this map right now, and they should be fixed. And I was hoping that there would be an updated version. I'll have to contact Brian and see when he plans to kind of republish this to update to where he's at. Because I know he's been working, but whether he's made changes in Montpelier or not is the question. So the point the planning commission was talking about at the last meeting was to start to make a decision of, are there areas that we want to make a specific comment on, to go through and say, this should also be, and for context again, the purple area is the downtown, and the pink area is the planned growth area. The purple and the pink combined are the two areas where you could have tier 1A and tier 1B. So we had conversations about, all right, well, what about the area out here with Northfield Street for the Independence Green and these guys out here? They're currently not, but I would argue as the planning director, there is a sidewalk that goes out there. So your requirements are, you've got to have a sidewalk, you've got to have public transit. Well, that's the main line that goes for the Northfield bus route. So you've got two things. I could see this orange area also being planned growth area. If I were pushing back, that would be one I would say, I think that should be adjusted. Moving around the city, we've got Berlin Street coming out. The sidewalk to Berlin Street comes out and goes down this street. So there certainly are parcels over here. And we could argue, and I think some of you did, all of Berlin Street out to the town line has the Hospital Hill bus route. And I can tell you, living on Berlin Street, that bus goes by a lot, multiple times an hour. So anyone living out here has easy access to the downtown. This could all be certainly, Sherwood, we can leave for debate and discussion because there's no sidewalk on that. It's steep. Should that or shouldn't that? But certainly Berlin Street and these properties adjacent to it could easily be also included in planned growth area. They haven't liked, and I don't think will successfully get, the rest of River Street, Route 302, the cars, car dealerships, Tractor Supply. I think that'll be a hard sell to get the land use review board to accept those. But that's an area for thought and consideration. I think as we were looking out, Gallison Hill is kind of disconnected, even though it's got water and sewer and pieces. That part of Country Club Road. I don't know the thought. That is the forested corner. I'm not sure why, but that would be an interesting question of why wouldn't we put the entire parcel in? So that could be an addition on that piece. Looking around, this doesn't look bad. It's kind of strange. I think it was pointed out, Maria or Leah, somebody pointed out that it's weird to have the road and have the left side of the road in the planned growth area and the right side is not. I can't remember which road this is off Town Hill, but that is kind of an interesting question. You'd think if one side's in, the other side should be, or vice versa, that one side should not be. If one side is out, the other side should be out as well. That's an interesting question to figure out what's going on that little cul-de-sac.
I have friends that live on the cul-de-sac and there's nothing physically different.
On the left side of the road and the right side of the road. But I think that's what we had been kind of talking about, is going around and picking out these little ones. And I think this was probably our biggest whatever pushing back was to go through and say, and this is where there's an actual project. Most of this area is green along, this is Elm Street, just so people trying to orient themselves. This big green blob where my cursor is the swimming pool. So we're talking just south of the swimming pool. It's the row of those houses. This is all not flood hazard area, it's river corridor. And so as we look at it, it's already developed. Most of the houses are right along that line, like right where that yellow and green line is. And we think there's a lot of infill potential, and it makes sense that that would be the case. So we would like to see that all as pink. I think that would make sense. But and if anyone had any others, I mean, I think that's a little bit of what we were starting to think about, was what other areas, and maybe Terrace Street. Where do the sidewalks, where does the water and sewer end? And I know Alan was looking, this is his Crestview property. There is certainly, we have it, I think we have it right on one of our maps. We have the line for the zoning district back here, which allows Alan's property to have more access into the planned growth area, which is accessing here. They got Crestview, but Crestview actually could connect back over here with a second entrance. And I think, I don't know, Alan was going to be meeting with Brian, and I don't know the outcome of that meeting. Well, we can follow up with that, but that's another one I think worth supporting if they haven't made that adjustment. This was another one. So I think what I can work with putting together this, if I've got some ideas of, I just went through a bunch, and if people said there's more or less, or yep, that's it, Mike, I can write up something working with Nick to go through and say, these are the areas we think should change, and whether Brian makes this change or whether we take this to the land use review board and say, land use review board, we think we would like you to make these recommendations back to CVRPC. We kind of have two bites at the apple depending on when they submit their comments. Yep.
Back to Elm Street where the pool was, or those houses that, you know, one side is pink. So just further east, like right where your cursor is. Yeah.
Oh.
What is that sliver?
Let's see. I'm trying to look. You probably can't see that. I can see the property lines hiding under this green strip. So this is Cummings Street, coming out in the green and turning to the left and going up.
I'm talking about the yellow sliver.
And this yellow sliver here.
Yeah.
So I was trying to orient people to go
Oh,
and say,
thank
this
you.
is where the
Okay.
road is. So I think these are the very back ends of a set of parcels. And I'm very curious. I'm actually going to make a note of this. I think they're using the state river corridor map.
Yeah.
So that's the state river corridor map. The city, when we adopted our zoning, stop the river corridor at Cumming Street. So as you come in, once you're in Cumming Street coming into town, there's no more river corridor that we enforce. And the reason why is just because you could start seeing how many, I mean, just all the properties on Elm Street are gobbled up by the river corridor. So we don't regulate the river corridor in that area because the river corridor is really where it is channelized, and are we going to keep it there? So in other words, if the river starts to move, we're probably going to put it back rather than take out 45 units of housing. We'll probably go back and save the 45 units of housing and put the river back and say from Cumming Street out, that's a different story, or upstream of Cumming Street is one story and downstream of Cumming Street is another. And I think these would not be, these little slivers here. They may be in the river corridor. No, because we cut off the river corridor. So we had an amendment that took the river corridor out of this side because the general rule of thumb for river corridors is it can't take out a road, and that's Cumming Street. So the river corridor has to be trimmed at the at Cumming Street and not allowed to take it out. So these were all then no longer in the river corridor. So that's an interesting question as to whether that's one that we push to put back in. That's one I think we would have a hard time winning. That's not to say we don't try, but there are ones, I think by and large, as I zoom back out, we're getting about 95% of what we asked for. If you look at our city plan, the little orange spot on Northfield Street, and we have in our city plan, Sherwood is all in, and this whole section is all in the planned growth area. And then we would have closed those in. We would have said that's all planned growth area, those little slivers. And I can't remember in the city plan how far out Terrace Street we go, but I do know that these sections that I was talking about on Alan's property on Crestview, these are definitely on our map, are definitely in. So I think it's worth exploring and making sure that these at least get considered by the Land Use Review Board because they make sense. This is what Alan referred to as the bony pasture.
Can you explain a little bit more about the process that you were just describing? You said we could potentially talk to the Land Use Review Board and they could talk to CVRPC. That's news to me. I'm curious about how that works. You said it depends on when something is submitted.
So my understanding of how the process is going to work is the map is sent as a preliminary to the Land Use Review Board for their review and comment. And so their RPC is planning on doing that very soon by the end of the month. So if I manage to write something up and get it to them before they submit it, Brian might look at it and go through and say, I tell you what, I'm going to talk to Christian and see if it makes sense to make these adjustments or to leave it as it is. And if it's hypothetically, they leave it as it is and it goes to the Land Use Review Board, the Land Use Review Board is going to have a hearing on it. And we could submit written comments and say, the City of Montpelier Planning Commission has identified 6 changes that we would like to see. Here are the 6 areas, and have a written reasoning as to why, for example, Northfield Street, it's got the bus traffic, it's got a sidewalk, it's zoned with this, it's got water and sewer. There's no reason why this area should be excluded from the planned growth area. And then we could make similar arguments for these other areas and make the best case that we can. And then the Land Use Review Board is going to make a recommendation back. They're not going to vote yes or no. They're going to send a set of comments back to the RPC to go through and say, here are our final comments for the entire county. on where we want to see changes before you adopt this.
Yeah.
Then they're going to make changes. The RPC is going to either make those changes or not. Presumably they'll make them because they're going to want to get approved. And then in the fall, they would go through and start an adoption process to amend the current regional plan. And they're going to add this map in which case there's another public hearing process. We can then go to the public hearing process, assuming we lost the first time and we lost the second time. We can then go in the third time and go through and say, all right, now it's fall. Now you're adopting the map. Now we want you to go through and put these things in, make these changes. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. So yeah, I think we'll have multiple bites at the apple, but I think certainly having the land use review board be able to take a look at it will give, because land use review board may look at it and say, yes, CVRPC, you can either put this in or not put this in. If you want to put it in, we would let you put it in, because they're probably not going to say you have to put it in.
Yeah.
They would probably just go through and say, if you want to put that in, we would think that would be okay. It's up to you and your commission to make that determination.
Yeah. I have more questions and comments, but I'm curious if you want to bring Alan in.
Alan, do you have something to add?
Hi there. Thank you. Thank you for all the excellent work, everybody. I just have a quick question. Mike, on the GIS page, which I love using, can we flick it like on that page and show the ortho underneath, or are we always forced to look at it in this color format?
I don't know if
'Cause
toggle base map. Let's see what happens if I hit
I
toggle
know,
base map.
and if the planning commission hasn't gone to the assessor's GIS mapping page, it's fantastic.
Yeah, this is the CVRPC map, and so it's I would have to change over to the other mapping software to get to another map.
Thank you. I just know it might help some of the folks see some of the areas. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, if there's a piece of information people want, I can hunt down and try to pull it up.
Is this on the reporter map, the stakeholder input portal?
This is the CVRPC stakeholder input portal map.
So I'll just say, Alan, in the bottom right, there is a button for layer list. If you're to click on if you scroll down and click on any of the CVRPC regional future land use as an overall data set or individual, you can turn them
Oh,
off. And then
thank you.
Mike, in the lower left, you can switch between aerial and street map.
Oh,
Can you
see,
change it?
now you can actually see my parcel in the field that Mike was talking about in the Boney pasture.
Yeah,
Cool.
unfortunately, it doesn't overlay with what they were showing, but you kind of get the idea. This is where they had put their line. It kind of came out. You could see this, but you can see, yeah, and this clearly
That's
shows.
it.
And this is the line we used in our zoning, I believe. Is you can see this line. It kind of follows here. What Alan refers to as the Boney pasture is this area that's kind of tucked between the trees in this area. This is more.
And there's redaptive use of the barn.
Yep.
And so
and
that
there's the-
barn also has sewer and water because they used to milk there.
So it gives an idea of, and what they did is they put the planned growth area along this line, which means this is good farmland. This is more of what I would use as pasture land. So it would be more likely if you wanted to run a secondary road, you just sneak it in behind these trees and you've got a secondary access out to this area, which is the developable. You can kind of see the tracings of some roads. So, but that gives a couple access points that I think it would be worthwhile to explore that possibility, because I know we did when we did the zoning maps.
Thank you so much for showing.
Now I got to
that,
figure
guys.
out how to go back.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
If
There we
I
go.
can jump back in, and I have some questions and comments that are going to go into a more like creative and naive space, if that's okay. So what I'm curious what the if there's a mandate for the I'm again naive for the land use review board. What is their sort of, do they have a particular bent? Is there a mandate that they are, from what I know, is that Vermont has a housing crisis, and that we would like to build more housing in established cities, towns, close to downtown, in downtown, around downtown. What if, so let's say Montpelier decides that all of the rural areas in Montpelier that are not conserved currently are going to be included in the planned growth area. What would the Land Use Review Board say to that? Would they take a look at it and celebrate it and say, this is exactly what we need? Here's a vibrant downtown, a desirable place where people want to live. And there are some really, Montpelier is special in the sense that it has some really large parcels, single parcels that are undeveloped, and it's the Goldman properties, but it's not. You go out Town Hill Road and there are more parcels that are in the rural areas that are potential opportunities. So we put forth, I'm not suggesting that we do this, but if we did put forth all rural areas that are in the planned growth area, how does the Land Use Review Board respond to that? Are they up in arms? Because absolutely not. This is the definition of sprawl. You are taking over rural lands. Or do they say, Montpelier is 10 square miles. It's smack dab in the center of the Central Vermont Regional Planning area. It is a central hub for business, and it actually prevents sprawl in surrounding towns if we build out Montpelier. Like, I have no clue how folks would be responding to this, but it's just a thought, because what I see in our planned growth area is, okay, it's all built up already, pretty much, except for Goldman Properties and Country Club Road. So those are places to expand, but everything else is built up. So it makes it easier to do larger projects as infill in those areas, but it doesn't push for much bigger developments outside of those areas. So yeah, that's my thinking, and I'm just putting it out there as food for thought.
In some ways, I think that it's a rhetorical question. Which way is the LURB going to lean? I think we know that they aren't going to be happy if we included the entirety of Montpelier.
I'm actually, this is my naivete speaking up here and saying, how do you know that to be the case? If we are as a state being pushed in a positive direction to build more housing, why isn't that the focus?
Well, it should be, but I just don't. I'm not sure that it is. But that being said, I think that's neither here nor there. We should be pushing. We should be. I think all the examples that Mike laid out, I fully agree. Like, let's push the boundary of our growth center as far as they will let us. Christian at the last meeting had made the point that if you're going to do that, like, they anticipate the LURB pushing back. And whether the LURB actually does or not, I don't know. We should put something forward that we aren't doing it based on whether we're concerned about pushback. We should be doing the most aggressive and making, like Mike said, whatever the strongest case is, whether it's a weak case on some of these parcels, like, we should still include them and make that case.
We definitely should. I completely agree with that. I guess where I struggle is, why would the Land Use Review Board in a place like Montpelier that is that has density and wants to build upon that density and further out, why wouldn't the Land Use Review Board be encouraging us to, I think this is what you're talking about as being rhetorical, but why wouldn't they encourage us to go beyond instead of anticipating any sort of pushback? Why wouldn't we be anticipating encouragement?
First, I'll just say I am heartened by your aggressive vision of the future.
Possibly aggressive.
No, and I think it's. I mean, I think we have a commissioner body that is generally supportive of that vision. I think there's two things that I would sort of temper your enthusiasm a little bit. Is one is the land use review board has been stood up for maybe 2 years at this point. They don't really have a track record yet, an established track record for us to be able to really predict where they will be. And frankly, I don't think they've put out a lot that would suggest that they've articulated kind of their priorities when looking at something like this. And I think the second thing is I think irrespective of however they land on these things, when they start to sort of telegraph how they see things, I think we want to make sure that whatever we put before them, it shows that we're being very thoughtful about it. And that's not to say that if we were to say all of the rural districts are now in the Planned Growth Center, that we haven't thought about it. It's just that is a very one might be inviting the perception that we're being a little arbitrary. And that's not to say we are, but that's just the thing is,
yep,
is looking at the sort of very discrete changes that Mike's talking about right now shows that we're putting thought in, and we can build off of that. And my thought is we could probably get there if that's where the commission wants to go, but I think we need to be very thoughtful, very methodical, and more importantly, iterative. In how we go about doing that. So
I appreciate that. I want to note that I'm not putting forth a proposal. I'm really trying to get at what is the mentality of all the groups involved.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, I think at this point that we don't know enough about the LURB to really get a good read on what we can and can't, like what our chances are with something like an aggressive proposal like that.
Right.
I think somewhat they're also going to be constrained by what's in statute as well, and what's been adopted. And the one I'll point out, which is probably the best example, is the one we had a good conversation about, and I agree. I support our plan. This is Memorial Drive in the Winooski River, and this is the Department of Labor, GMP, liquor, high school. By their rules, this area, and remember how I said, well, if you're in the designated downtown or growth center, you're exempt from the rules, and if you're out, flood hazard areas will keep you out of being in that area. Well, that's what they were saying here. We would not win if we went in and said we want the Department of Labor and these buildings to be in the planned growth area, because they're going to say, well, it's in the river corridor and it can't be. And it can't be in planned growth area. As much as we can all sit around the table and say, if you build it to flood codes, it's not going to flood, and we could really build very walkable locations right next to these areas. And I would be 100,000% convinced we could build perfectly safe housing in that area and really provide high density. People were talking about, 5-story buildings. You could put 5-story buildings along Memorial Drive and have these areas right up against the river would be green space and parking lots, and you'd be fine. But we could make that argument, but there's a 99% chance we're going to lose because statute says we can't.
That's by statute.
Yeah, it's either by statute or by rule that this is not allowed. And that's, I think, what Brian was pushing back on. So as much as we would like to now, again, it can put it on people's radars to go through. But right now, the way the state is and the way the state sees and talks about floodplains, it's really about nobody should be building in floodplains anymore, period. And it makes it very hard to kind of have these conversations about already developed areas where you're like, yes, this area flooded and it flooded really badly. But, since 1973, 5 buildings were built in our floodplain and not one of them flooded. And that's when our floodplain rules went into effect. So
Yeah, and just to speak briefly to the around the idea of we shouldn't be building in floodplains. That is I think a perfectly fine opinion, even though there are alternatives. But when that's put forth, that we shouldn't be building in floodplains, it should come along with here's where you should be building. So here are my recommendations. I fear that, and this is a bigger statement, but there's so much of putting the brakes on in particular areas without solutions for, again, if not there, then where? Tell us where it should be really encouraged. And I get the sense that might not be out there. There's a lot of like, maybe not here, maybe not here, maybe not here. Instead of maybe not here, but absolutely 100% yes here.
Yeah, there is. I keep describing this as like a catch-22 to all of my people in the community who I've been talking to about this, is that we are a city on a floodplain. And so we are being told that we can't build anything. Well, we can't have this designation for anything that's not already in the built area downtown. But then we also can't have this designation for things that are not in the downtown because they don't have sidewalks yet. So it's like, okay, so we're getting this designation for the parts that are already built. But the thing is that those things are already built. And the other, there's like layers of catch here, because the other catch is that we can't demolish, or you can, under certain circumstances, demolish historic buildings. Okay. So we can only build within this area that is already built, but you can't destroy anything in order to build a new thing. So where do you build? I mean, it's just like these layers of conflict, but at the same time, we need to build 500 units, go. And it's kind of like, well, where? So I am on Tim's side here. I think anything in this yellow should be part of our growth area. I assume rural areas are designated as such because I don't have sewer and water, but the yellow areas do. Unless we start, my husband's from Arizona, and out there they build the sidewalks and the city before they build the houses and the buildings. And so you have like these like weird ghost neighborhoods that are just like a grid of streets and sidewalks and no buildings. And it's really creepy. Unless that's where we are headed, I feel like we have to put things into this growth area that are not yet sidewalked. The sidewalk comes with the buildings in the way that we do our zoning, right? When people build a new development, they are the ones that put in the sidewalks.
Yeah, and so the sidewalk rules are fortunately a little bit more reasonable in this version than in previous versions. So previous programs were very much strict like that, and you had to have them already there before you could get approved, and you ended up chasing your tail. This one has a few caveats. If you've got the public transit, so the sidewalk stops in Berlin Street, but the public transit keeps going. Also, they gave an exemption for streets that have less than 1,000 cars a day. So these smaller streets, all of a sudden you have, like, if you're on Berlin Street, you've got Downing Street. Or if you're on Berry Street, you've got Downing Street, little street that goes up. It doesn't have sidewalks. It's like, well, of course you can walk down the street. There's only 8 houses on it. And so that's allowed to now be in, where in the past it was kind of this, well, how do we address this? We have a complete streets plan. I think it needs to be updated with some of our new stuff. That can also be used if you have them in your plan. So if our plan says, and it'd be interesting to see how that would play out. In our plan, our complete streets plan, Sherwood is designated as a street that should have a sidewalk because of its characteristics, the amount of traffic, the speed of the traffic. For this to be a complete street, it needs to have a sidewalk. It doesn't. It would be very expensive to put one in, but we've designated that area that it should have a sidewalk. Is that enough to get us over the hurdle for getting it into a planned growth area? I don't know. I mean, I think some questions, getting to Aaron's point, we just don't know precedent. What are they going to fall on and what are they not going to? And I think certain areas, they let their eyes kind of lead the way. Like we were talking about all the opportunities that could exist at National Life. They're going to look at that and say, this isn't a complete neighborhood. It's not going to be allowed in. It's like, yeah, but we're planners. What do we want it to be?
Yeah.
Then we plan it to be that way and we give the programs that would allow it to happen and we give incentives. It's like, yeah, but it's not there right now.
Yeah.
And there you go. And I've gone to downtown board meetings and had more or less success with different places to go through and say, well, yeah, but it's not that way now. It's like, well, I'm sorry, we're planners. We're looking at the future of what we think and then trying to set programs in place that will help us get there.
Yeah, our city plan is a future land use map. What we're working on, what CVRPC is working on is their future land use map. Like future is the first word in the name here.
That's like the irony of this discussion.
Yeah, so I think a little bit to your argument, Tim, I think a little bit of that is going to come back to in our own future land use map, we didn't include those areas. So I think that would be one place that would get pushed back. It's like, well, it's not in your plan to have these areas. That would be something we would consider going forward. I think some of these areas are more challenging. They're where the places we have talked about do have bus routes. If you're going up North Street or you're going up Elm Street, you don't have those bus routes that these other places do. Yeah. And there isn't sidewalks and there aren't plans for sidewalks, but you know, are there arguments or cases that could be made for some other places? You know, I think we pushed Toy Town, so out where you get your creamies. That's not in the planned growth area. I argued there's a bike path. It doesn't have a sidewalk, but it does have a designated bike path that goes back. So it does have its multimodal piece there. I didn't win that argument, but I think it's another one. It's a good case to go through and say, hey, let's make the case that says that should be in. It is disconnected, but it doesn't have a bus. I don't think there's a bus that goes to Middlesex and down Route 2, but it does have a bike route. And you know, okay, how multimodal do you want? Is it really just about sidewalks? And we take out a bike lane to put in a sidewalk, and that's too far for people to walk. You're actually better off leaving the bike lane there because the most likely people that is a very bikeable distance. There's no hill, flat.
Yeah, we bike it.
And end up being safer likely because that one's set across too.
So I think we pick our battles that we think, because I wouldn't want to go and get into a case where they think, oh, we're going to pull ourselves out.
Yeah.
But I think we pick our ones, and it's a good exercise to start thinking about if, you know, yeah, why not more?
I think I tried to, I think I asked this at the last meeting of Christian and Brian, but I don't remember what the answer was. It was probably, we don't know. When we could possibly get a second swing at this, like right now we pick, like we do what as Mike is recommending, and we pick our battles and we try to expand our growth area as much as possible. But when could we potentially come back and get a chance to amend it?
So if you're kind of speaking in the short term, I kind of had some of this. I was hoping this online portal map was going to be updated before this meeting.
No, sorry, I mean in the long term. Like, so we go through this process, we get what we get.
Yep.
We come up with future capital budgets about future sidewalks. We make our future plans to bolster our case. with the LURB, when do we get to come back and try an amendment?
So I think that would probably come down to, I know there were some rules that are in place, right? If I understand it correctly, there's some rules in place for being able to amend the boundary if it's smaller bites, 10, 15 acre bites. So that way you can capture, sometimes you got a line that gets drawn and it's the one property outside of that decides they now have the ability to be developed and they want to get put in. But I think the bigger amendments are going to have to come, and I don't know what are all the pieces that need to be in place, but we would need to amend our plan probably, but we would have to go back and request the Regional Planning Commission to amend their plan. So we would probably have to make some kind of request. So let's say it's 2027 and we recognize a new area where there's somebody who's come up and said, I've got an area and I would like to get this included into the planned growth area. So that way we can build it out and it's currently not in there. We could go through and ask, because it's all based on the regional land use map. So we'd have to go to the Regional Planning Commission and say, we would like you to amend your map. They would have to go through an amendment process, which, is same as adopting our plan. You've got to have 2 public hearings. You got to notice. They have a couple extra steps with theirs, and then they would send that to the LURB for review, and then the LURB would respond back and say, yes, this is okay, or no, this is not okay, and then you'd adopt it. So I think that would be the process. It's going to be a much more, it's not something that's going to happen relatively quick. I think it's something that if you're thinking of it in 2027, you might have it done by 2028.
Maybe, if you're lucky. It sounds to me like,
Not bad.
it sounds to me like that's a case for being pragmatically aggressive right now.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm gonna drop some shirts.
Pragmatic.
Player Planning Commission, pragmatically aggressive. I like that a lot.
Passively, aggressively,
Pragmatically aggressive.
I think
on my sort of aside, I want to say that the specifics that we've been talking about, I'm all on board with. I think are really sound.
So Berlin Street, Northfield Street.
Yeah. So, yep, the Elm Street, fixing the Elm Street piece, asking about the Sabins pasture piece. I think the question for Berlin Street is Berlin Street, yes, Sherwood as well.
Yeah.
Kind of go for it and let them
Give it a shot.
take Sherwood back out if they want to, but
Yeah.
and then make sure there's the Crestview little piece that we wanted to get connected through, which is over on Terrace Street. And we were going to check on what is up with the road on Town Hill, where everybody on the east
Oh,
side
right.
of the street is out and
Yeah.
everybody on the west side of the street is in. That's kind of not making much sense. I'm pretty sure I know why that is, and I don't think that's another one of those ones that goes and says it's not in a designated area. They're going to just probably fall. I mean, we can
Okay.
argue our case, but I think that's one we would lose on the rules. Same with, I wouldn't make the case of trying to argue the Department of Labor, but that area, but it's your call. It's your memo, depending on which ones you guys want to argue for. But I think,
Get a sense that's running up against the wall.
yeah, that's,
Alan, do you have something you want to add?
Yes, thank you. I think you're all doing a great job. I was just curious, Mike, in the areas like you just described, the high school and GMP, if we agreed as a community to elevate those areas, would they allow us to take those out of that floodplain zone and was going to say thank you for all this fine tuning. And I would also encourage the group too to really keep that piece very open about national life. You never know what that could really be for our community. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, Alan, about the area down there. I don't think it would matter because it's in the river corridor as well. So filling in the floodplain would get us out of the floodplain, but not the river corridor. And that's really why that line is as wide as it is in that location. So that could work for some cases, but not in this case. But that's not to say we should not think and plan for that area to be redeveloped. It just means anything that happens there is not going to be in a designated area and it's going to have to go through Act 250. So let's make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that we can do things. What we're trying to do now is to create areas where we have the least number of barriers to help us be able to maximize our opportunities to get housing built. And that's just going to be an area that's going to have to go through Act 250 if it's more than X number of units.
So how about National Life then? Do you really think it's because we haven't zoned it as, what was it zoned before?
Gateway.
Gateway.
I mean, I think we're talking right now in the right direction of rezoning it. And maybe if we get the zoning correct before this fall, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of go back and say, why not put that into the planned growth area? It's now zoned mixed use residential 2 and would allow for high density housing. It may not be developed. It's up to the property owner, but at least it would put that on the table as an opportunity. But I will put stuff together and I will have that on my to-do list. I can't make promises. We are extremely busy right now. But I will have that on my list. I know we've got 3 weeks till the next meeting. But I'll have that on my list of something. I'll try to prepare something so we can approve that and send that forward. And if I get an opportunity to meet up with Brian before that, I will give this verbally to him. These are the changes and see how many of them he's willing to make in advance. And if it goes out without it, then we'll go to the LURB and make our case there.
Thank you. It is 7:20. We have one more agenda item. Is to continue the discussion on the zoning map updates, but I feel like 10 minutes is not going to do that discussion justice. So.
I can just quickly go through and say what you have, and Sean, apologies if you don't have a copy online. There is a June 22nd draft changes. All I did for that map was to try to take what I'd heard so far and transpose it across the rest of the city. So that way, when we get back to having this conversation, hopefully we don't have 3 more meetings to talk about this. Hopefully this helps us to narrow down in of what are the other areas. So I tried to add in, the decision was Maria's mixed use residential areas out Berlin Street. I just added those in where she had them on her map, and made the other adjustments for what I thought would be mixed use residential 2. And again, it's just lines and colors on the map, and it's really meant there to see how close did we get. And then hopefully that gives us an opportunity to walk around town on the map and go through and say, yeah, this should be this and this should be that. But I wouldn't call those recommendations. I would just call that's where I think we are going direction we're heading, and see what people think.
Great. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks, Mike. That looks really great, actually. Yeah.
Oh, you have a copy online?
I found it says it's updated June 22nd.
Okay.
From the link from the agenda, and it's just the split screen now, and it looks good.
Great. Anything else on this? No. Okay. We have one last agenda item. It's adjournment. Looking for a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
Seconded by Maria. All those in favor of leaving, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll
Have a
look
great night.
forward to getting something from Sean before next meeting. Mark it up. as best we can.
Thank you,
Just-
folks, for all the hard work.